the RSNA. This is the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Podcast. My name is Paul Gee, and I'm a radiologist at the University of Maryland and co-host of the podcast.
And my name is Tejani, and I'm a radiology resident at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and co-host of the podcast. Each month, we dive into the hottest topics in radiology AI and talk with leading experts, thought leaders, and movers and shakers in the field. Welcome to this episode of the Radiology AI podcast. For the first episode of the new year, we caught up with members of the Trainee Editorial Board to hear about their experiences.
Merel Huisman, MD, PhD, MSc, is an MSK Fellow and cardiothoracic radiologist at Radboud University Medical Center in the Netherlands. She's an epidemiologist by training, USOME board member, Young Club Chair. Her research interests include studying the methodology of clinical evaluation of AI-based tools, including factors like metrics, study design, and standardization. John Mayfield, MD, MSc, is a diagnostic radiology resident and concurrent PhD student at USF Health in Tampa, Florida, who's currently applying for neuroradiology and imaging informatics fellowships. He was a participant in the 2022 ASNR/ASFNR AI workshop. His research interests include temporal spatial machine learning models and quantum computing and machine learning. Iwan Paulucci, PhD, is a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Interventional Radiology at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. He's a software engineer by training who's worked in the industry for 10 years. He has a BSc in computer science, an MSc and PhD in biomedical engineering with focus on image-guided therapy. His research interests include translational research for interventional oncology treatments, mainly in the liver, bringing stereotactic guidance, robotics, and AI all the way into clinical routine.
So join us in a conversation about our guest journeys working with the Trainee Editorial Board. Learn more about the unique experience working with a diverse group of experts in the field of imaging AI. Hello, everyone, and welcome, Merel, John, and Iwan, members of our Trainee Editorial Board, to the Radiology AI podcast. It is such a pleasure to host this Trainee Editorial Board takeover. That's right. This is our first Trainee Editorial Board takeover. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Trainee Editorial Board, this is a 2-year opportunity where members learn about peer review, biostatistics, research design, and journalistic ethics, while helping with the manuscript's peer review process. All Trainee Editorial Board members participate in the journal's review process and contribute to activities such as the Vasty Deep Editors blog, which you may have seen, our social media activities, especially on Twitter, and a journal club hosted periodically. But importantly, this podcast itself is an initiative that manifested from the Trainee Editorial Board. So we wouldn't be here without the Trainee Editorial Board, and I think we're all thankful for that. So all of us have had very diverse experiences, and each of us has our own story within in terms of how we were introduced to the Trainee Editorial Board and how our journey's going so far. So with that, Merel, if you could start off with, how are things going? I think you have a special role in that you are an alumna of the Trainee Editorial Board and now an advisor for the current members. So what do you think?
Yes, I am. And thanks for having me here. So what do I think? Well, I'm really proud of how Chuck has built the journal, first of all. And I first heard about Radiology AI in 2019 when Tim Leiner, my former supervisor, told me about the journal. It was new then. And then I saw the advertisement about joining the editorial board, and I wrote a letter and my resume and all that, and I got accepted, thankfully, and it has been a great experience. It was during COVID though, 2020, 2022, so I'm a fresh alumna, and so it's weird because I haven't seen anyone in real life, but Chuck though. But yeah, it has been great, even from afar, from Europe, and one of the few European women to join, and it has been a great experience. You get exposed to the community. You learn. It's really stimulating. You start self-learning a bit more than you otherwise would have because of the reviews you do, and the lectures have been of super high quality. So yeah. And now I'm serving on the advisory panel, And this basically has two goals. There's three of us, Kirti Maguja and Jeffrey, Rudy, and me. And we try to increase diversity of the journal as well as improving the quality of the experience of the program.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're lucky to have you and Kirti and Jeff as our advisors. And I think all of us are excited to learn from you all as well. And so, John and Iwan, why don't you tell us more about what it's like to be a Trainee Editorial Board member? John, we can start with you.
Thanks a lot for having me today. I really appreciate it. So my name is John Mayfield. I'm a PGY4 resident, radiology resident at University of South Florida, and crazy enough to be doing a PhD during residency as well here. And just recently got into machine learning, probably about a year and a half ago through my master's degree. I was doing it at Hopkins during training. And it's really interesting to always go from what you learn in the classroom to what happens out in the real world. And I think that when I was fortunate enough to be selected for the Trainee Editorial Board, one of the first things I learned was there are a lot of frameworks in place that really help to define what is critical and rigorous science in the field that exists here within radiology already. And I just out of my own naivete, I didn't really appreciate that before. And so to move from that computer science realm over into the radiology aspect, it was really refreshing to see things like the claim checklist. Not only was it crucial for me to be able to understand it for my own research, but then to take that and then critically analyze the papers that were coming in and looking at what is the state of the art and what can push those limits. And so that was an amazing opportunity that really took it from the didactic classroom out into the very practical sense. And it really impacted my research personally going forward, as well as how I wrote papers and grants from there. As far as the social media aspect is concerned, that was an element I didn't expect at first. And that was a tremendous opportunity to be able to really reach out with some crazy things like doing the quantum machine learning thing that we did back in October, and how great of a response we got with that, and how few other areas would I have that opportunity or others to be able to do something that really kind of pushes the boundaries and makes others just think about, maybe this isn't something we're using right now, but it will be in the near future.
That's wonderful. I really think that our role here is like that of an ambassador, right? As you said, there's so many guidelines, so many paradigms that you learn about, and honestly, so many upcoming trends in research and in terms of what's actually available now in this field that may not be accessible unless you're actually in the thick of it. And so as an ambassador through the journal, we can bring that back to our communities, whether that's the clinicians or the researchers or the more PhD side of things. So great to hear about that perspective, John. Iwan, what about you? How's it going?
Yeah, sure. So I'm coming from a little bit of different field. I'm originally an IT guy, the guys who fix your computers when they're not working. And afterwards, I started computer science. And after that, I decided to do something more interesting than programming, like web shops. So I decided to go into biomedical engineering. And I think about maybe 10 years ago, we had actually a lecture in medical image analysis where we learned how to auto segment images, how to train algorithms, and that was like deep learning was not yet really the thing back then. And so it was really between then and now, like also during my PhD, it was really great to see how the whole field took off and how everything from computer vision, what I originally learned in computer science, really got into radiology and into the medical field. And in terms of the trainee editorial board, I mean, actually wasn't aware of the journal until maybe 1.5 years ago, I would say, because at that time, Chuck Khan, he gave a guest lecture at our institute and kind of showed that this new journal. And so I started also looking at the articles that are in there. And I think just by chance, beginning of last year, I saw like I can't remember if it was on LinkedIn or Twitter. I saw an advertisement that there were, open positions for trainee editorial board, and I thought, oh, that's a great opportunity, to start, getting into the review process, meeting new people, building my network, and I got accepted, which was, and for me was really great as an engineer, inside the community, and really building connections with radiologists and with clinicians. Working in the field, trying to kind of, bridge the gap between what is done like really pure engineering research and what is done like really in the clinic, what is needed. So for me it's a really great opportunity. And I think just purely reviewing papers, I mean, I think I've just one example. I'm right now working on a manuscript, and after I reviewed, I think 2 or 3 other papers the last few months, I basically went back and just started redoing quite a lot, because I figured out that I did some things in this manuscript that was that was kind of critical of in the papers I reviewed. So I thought, okay, I have to do a little bit a better job there. So it really helps, like reviewing it really helps also your own writing. So that's a really great opportunity. And also preparing up some blog posts now that should come out soon.
You highlighted so many things that we want to talk about. I think we'll have to extend this session by another 30 minutes just to make sure we hit on all those points. So thank you. No, Iwan, I think that you make a great point on several occasions, but one important thing is this really is sort of a microcosm, right, for bringing together all stakeholders, right, all individuals from different perspectives that influence imaging AI and are influenced by imaging AI. So I love that we were able to learn from each other in that sense as well. And I think let's start with that reviewing aspect. I think one of the privileges of being on the Trainee Editorial Board has been participating in the peer review process, helping us develop our skills as reviewers, but also helping contribute to the field. So, Merel, if I could start with you here, how have you grown as a reviewer? Or are there any particular moments that you can think of when you thought, "Wow, this is a fantastic opportunity," and why, if so?
Yeah, that's a great question. So exactly, the one of the big parts of the Trainee Editorial Board is the reviewing. You can also get some guidance on that. And in the beginning, there have been lectures. One of them was how to be an all-star reviewer, and that was really excellent. It's actually on YouTube for anyone who is interested. I think it's an excellent lecture. So in the beginning, I think we all recognize this. It takes quite a lot of time because it will be a topic. The paper will be on a topic that you know, but won't necessarily know all the details. So you will have to look for the recent literature and make a few checks in the references and all that. And in the beginning, it took me a few hours actually, but it's not very sustainable. If you're reviewing a lot, you get more invitations as you go. And I really learned to speed up the process and just, let's say, have quite a quick check. Actually, one of my former supervisors said you should be able to do a review in an hour. So I try to train myself to do that, and I'm almost there because you also want a good job. And actually, sometimes I'm also just excited by the topic, and I see something I don't know exactly, and I start reading about it, looking YouTube videos up about it, and then yeah, you're a few hours in, right? But you learn a lot in the process too. So does this answer your question?
Absolutely. It did more than answer my question. It gave me a couple of action items for myself. So thank you. John, what about you? Any particular experiences from helping with the review process that come to mind?
Yeah, I want to point out some important things for those listeners out there that are maybe considering doing the Trainee Editorial Board next year. And they're like, I'm an R3, I'm going to be looking at boards, I'm doing research at the same time. I actually want to, kind of go out there and do other things in life besides just radiology on my free time. I will say that having the flexibility of this program to whether you can accept or deny, whether, say, hey, listen, I have a series of months that I'm going to be on call, and being able to have that communication because you are a trainee, and them being flexible enough with that is so liberating to be able to have the access to the amount of resources and teaching and mentorship that we have here, and then to be able to say, you know what, I'm a radiology resident still. This is very difficult for me at this time. And then to be like, no problem, just let us know when you're available again. I can't say enough how great that is. The second component is it's not just the reviewing the papers part that really makes this great. It's also being a part of those editorial board conversations, those conference calls, and how important that is to be able to see what everyone else's input is on this, and being part of that vote as they're voting there in that last part of it. I mean, it's just so crucial, and it's so much more than receiving a paper in an email, reviewing it on your own time. All very important things, right? And definitely, like Merel had alluded to, this is a skill set that definitely takes time to hone in. But to be able to see that extra dimension, I think is just crucial to this entire process and what makes this experience so unique.
Now that's a fantastic point, right? The whole idea of this that the process is continuous, that you have feedback that actually lets you improve for the next time. I think as an independent reviewer, sometimes that may not be the case, and maybe a little sporadic. Maybe you don't have any feedback in terms of maybe you missed a point, or maybe there was something that you didn't think of, but another reviewer thought of. So I absolutely love that. Absolutely. Iwan, what about you?
Yeah, I also have about 2 points to make. So first thing, just about reviewing itself. I mean, usually if we look in academia, the people who review papers are usually senior academics. So you need to have written and published a couple of papers before you get invitations to review. But as we discussed before and we saw now, like really reviewing helps your own writing process. So actually junior people reviewing papers, it actually helps us, I think, quite a lot in our writing skills. So that's a great thing. And the other thing, typically, the way I think we see as authors, the reviewing process is we send a paper somewhere to a journal and then it ends in a black box, and 2-3 months later we get a response. Usually it's a rejection with lots and lots of comments, and you try to figure out what to do. And I think just looking behind the whole process, how it works, how the reviews are done, and also seeing like the reviews from from the other reviewers, some you see what they look at. And so it's really, I think it's really nice to see that the whole process behind, because sometimes you get the review back and think it's not that negative, why did the paper get rejected? And I think by seeing behind the whole editorial and review process here, you kind of start to appreciate that there's some other things going on in the back. You start to understand how these decisions come up, and it really helps.
Yeah, I would like to add here what I find really useful as well about reviewing a lot and getting some feedback is that you, because of the amount of papers you see, and it's also new research, right? So you get a unique insight in what's going on, like currently, because the papers you see in the journals online will be, I don't know, like a few months old or even a year sometimes, but the turnover gets quicker, by the way. But what I think is really cool is that it allows you to see what study designs, it's one of my interests, study designs in AI, are most prevalent, but also what are the mistakes, what metrics are people choosing, what works, what doesn't work, what is the most common study design. For example, proof of principle studies have been very, very prevalent, and not so many external validation studies, but they're coming up now. So to get really that overview, that meta-level overview of AI research, I think is very valuable also for your talks on conferences, etc.
Absolutely. No, I think that's one of the understated parts of the experience is just being able to understand where the field is, right? I do a lot of natural language processing myself, and we're seeing more of that in the imaging AI realm, specifically in terms of healthcare. And that's been established in industry, but it's just great to see where things are in the current environment in terms of how we're implementing these use cases in radiology. So absolutely great to see that. Iwan, I see you have something to say. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just a very quick quote that kind of adds to it. We once asked one of the professors in my master's, how do you keep up with the, with the literature, what's going on, like the really cutting edge of the research? And he's basically said, you have to review papers. That's how you keep up. And so I think that's good to add here.
And one way I found that you can help convey this insight, right? I think we all gain this insight from the process. I think the creative endeavors that everyone's participating in helps convey a sense of where the field is as well. So, for example, John, I know you've worked on a lot with quantum computing, including the rad chat or the tweet chat on Twitter, and we can talk more about what a tweet chat is if everyone. I don't know if everyone knows that yet, but it's pretty fun. I think John and we actually met through a tweet chat, but also through the blogs. I know the blogs have been a great venue for helping provide a very brief update in terms of where things are and what's coming up next. So, John, any thoughts on how, especially with your experience in terms of quantum computing, briefly, how your experience has been introducing that concept and any updates since then?
I think that one of the best things to see is someone who's really an expert in the field can describe things simply. And so I am neither an expert in the field nor did I describe it simply. But what it did force me to do was to really look at what was crucial, important, much as Merel had talked about with proof of concept versus what's practical. What is your audience, whether it's written or audio or whatever, or verbal, if you will. Um, what's important to them? What are they going to take away from that? Where do you start to lose their attention? And so I think that being kind of forced to put the pencil to the paper or the voice to the microphone or the tweet to the chat was being able to hone that down and take something that is a very complex topic and do allusions to MRI physics that radiologists already know about, and to make concepts and corollaries to our current machine learning knowledge and how similar it is, just how it takes very, very small data sets and extracts even more information out of it, and why that's important as we reach a plateauing amount of data with increased complexity within the imaging sets. But as far as going from the Rad AI chat to the blog, I think that was a really great correlation for us as well, is because not everyone's going to be on the Rad AI chat. Not everyone's going to read the blog, but there are some overlap in there. I don't know how that Venn diagram looks, but it's one of those things that, it was able to provide a separate, okay, what is the two, have you seen some of these, whatever the certain ads that will come up and it'll say 2-minute read or 5-minute read next to the title, right? So this was a 2-minute read on that Rad AI chat. And so that was really great to be able to put that down and say, okay, here's what's honed down. And I was able to show it to some of my mentors. And they were like, okay, I would kind of hone this in. And Chuck was great as well, absolutely phenomenal with his experience to say, okay, I think that we should take this whole section out and let's just put this and consolidate this. And then when the final product I felt was very good, it conveyed the topic and took a very complex process and honed it down to maybe 4 paragraphs with some really good resources available. So
What I personally really like about the tweet chat and also the blogs, it's really attuning to this trend where we only have like 8 minutes of attention span as opposed to 90 in the past, right? So, of course, papers are the fundament, but the summaries, like the tweet, the bite-sized summaries are, I think, equally important for research communication. So I think the journal really does a good job with this.
Yeah, and maybe also quickly from my side. So the tweet chat, personally, I think participating in it to me goes a little bit too fast. I know sometimes I feel I'm not good with that, but I like to read it like the next morning because they're still up, like just going through all the tweets and just reading the threads, and you can pick up some some good ideas, maybe some papers to read. And regarding the blog, I think that's really a good point. Like something that you can read, in 2, 3 to 5 minutes. And for example, what John mentioned before, about quantum computing. You take 5 minutes, you read, but you get some sense of the you get a little bit the idea, and you have like some resources where to read next, and you don't have to go through a couple of papers to get into the to get a rough idea of the topics. I think that's a really great platform.
yeah, and an important point of that is that again, it whets the appetite for they can seek out their own knowledge or look for further, correspondence, not just with the quantum, but everything with transformers, natural language processing, bias was an excellent topic that I think was really, really a hot topic for us. And that just says, hey, that was enough for me to gain an interest on this, and then I'm going to go out and explore it some more. Or maybe I go to Rad AI Journal and look towards that and see what's in that, since that's something they focused on.
Absolutely. I think what this does is it takes these really what can be intimidating topics and makes them accessible. And honestly, it opens the door to conversations. Every Rad AI chat, I've seen it myself, just as an opportunity for people who would otherwise not necessarily meet, whether it's geographic, time related. But if they come into contact, they start networking, and it actually leads to collaborations. It leads to new conversations. John, you mentioned bias. Bias is such an interestingly complex topic, and it's a challenge to really be concise about it sometimes. And so to start the conversation with that fantastic mitigating bias series that came out just recently at the end of last year, and to take that into new dimensions and to see well, what does that mean in terms of bias from the perspective of someone on the more technical side versus someone on the more practical clinical implementation side, thinking about social bias? I think those conversations are starting to prop up more because of not just the articles, but the conversations that have come about from the RAD AI chats and the blog. For our listeners who may be feeling left out, maybe you haven't been in a RAD AI chat and you're interested. Well, don't worry, we have you covered. Just go to Twitter and type in hashtag RAD AI chat, and you should be able to see every time we've mentioned that specific term in related AI radiology AI chat, tweet chat conversations. So not to switch the conversation too much here, but in terms of the Trainee Editorial Board serving as a conduit for creative endeavors, I think what we've seen is an encouragement to really think outside the box, right? And that, I think, itself is not just great for us personally, because we're challenged to think about, well, okay, how do we push the field? But it really allows us to, I think, well, push the field, but in terms of being able to access this audience that may not necessarily be thinking of how to push the field. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on things you've seen in real life that have been influenced by some of the ideas that have come about from these creative endeavors? We may be in the process. Maybe it's too early, but I can think of a few. I don't know. John, Merel, you want anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that the bias thing is definitely going to create a groundswell. And even for ourselves as reviewers, but as future scientists and current scientists. And I think that the more that this sort of makes its way out, at the work that Brad Erickson and the Mayo Lab has done, as well as the other contributions that were done, especially in introducing it through the RAD AI chat, I think that this will change the science and this will change the way that we look at these future models. Because the thing that's difficult that I think, and then Ewan can also speak to this, is, if you look at the journals out of IEEE, the Electrical Engineering Society, and similar ones like this, with like analysis of computer vision and things like that, they're typically around 3 to 5 years ahead of what we see in radiology, sometimes more. Visual spatial transformers have been around for quite some time, and we're just now starting to see them introduced into a few pieces of literature in the radiology standpoint. But one of the things that's key is that the way that we analyze this is still based upon techniques that computer scientists do and the same ideas. And so when we start talking about how can we become more critical reviewers as well as consumers, as radiologists, we're being inundated with a number of AI products, being able to look, okay, how was this validated? What sort of sample set did you use? Was this externally validated? Much to Merel's point, that we have very few things that use external validation, whether it's data siloing or just inavailability. It's beyond the point. Us being critical, not just as reviewers, but also as consumers, is going to be key to our future. So I think that out of all the things that we've encountered so far, again, this is anecdotal, I think that's going to be the most impactful going forward.
Thank you for the insight, John. I know we all appreciate that. Absolutely. And Merel, Iwan, any final comments as we come to the end of our conversation here?
Well, I think if you're talking about creative endeavors, what has been nice is that it's really, the Trainee Editorial Board really is like an incubator, much like my own You Saw Me Young Club. And if one of the members has an idea, there's this platform and also guidance to start a project. For example, it's only a small thing, but I've hosted like this virtual cocktail hour because I was in Europe and it was the pandemic. But also I've seen like the YouTube and yourself also, Ali, the podcast, and that has been really nice. And I think it's underestimated what this does to people's motivation and also exposure and learning. I like to call this transferable skills, right? Like organizing, brainstorming, putting words into action, all that. So yeah, it has been really nice.
Yeah, I think starting new project is really a good thing, because we build quite a network here, among different specialties and quite, also geographically. So for me personally, I think if I'm starting a new project, and I think looking for collaborators, I think just asking around in the Trainee Editorial Board would be probably one of the first guesses, because it's such a great network.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really a really good opportunity, definitely to build your network.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think that to their point, I think it's so important. I've spoke as a radiology resident, but again, I'm one of many, and not just as a resident, but or a trainee, but also as a scientist, as someone that is in a very diverse and inclusive environment that it has really been helped built by our mentors. And so to be able to be in a conversation in a circle like that is a rare opportunity nowadays, it seems, and to where you can reflect ideas off of one another. And even when we met at RSNA, the first time kind of meeting in person for many of us, the conversations that took place there spontaneously were just amazing. And so being able to have that circle of people, that I think that these relationships will extend well beyond the Trainee Editorial Board, hopefully, and that collectively we will be impacting the future of the field.
And one thing that our podcast co-host, Dr. Paul Yee, and I talk about, he's a great mentor for our Trainee Editorial Board members as well, by the way, just fantastic conversations. One thing we always talk about is just that ability to communicate with each other and learn from each other, right? Not just talking to those with similar careers, similar minded thought processes, but being able to see, how do you approach a given problem from a different angle, whether it's through virtual platforms like here on the podcast, or whether it's in person at RSNA, which was really fun, by the way. I was really fortunate to be able to meet many of y'all in person. So hopefully we can do that again. But so before we wrap up our session here today, I think it'd be wonderful to learn more about our guests and end on an exciting note in terms of what's to come. So Merel, if you could start us off with an exciting fun fact about yourself and what you're looking forward to in imaging AI.
I like traveling a lot. I went to Brazil 2 months this year. I love surfing, dancing, and I'm crazy about languages. And I am a huge perfume collector. I have a crazy large collection of perfumes, mostly vintages. So, a few fun facts. So, what I would love to see for AI and for the field to happen is that AI will, at least AI-based medical devices, what it actually is, I think, will either help reducing healthcare costs, improving patient-level outcomes, so not segmentation, but really like mortality or I don't know, morbidity. Or like the third could be that it increases access to healthcare, so that it really adds to healthcare sustainability on a bigger level. That would be, well, my professional dream, let's say.
I think we all share that dream for sure. And I think the great takeaway there is listen to more Radiology AI podcasts and read more of the Radiology AI journal so you can learn more. John, what about you? And this can be any fun fact about AI or about yourself.
So I'll do fun fact about myself since I have a bit of a diverse background. So for those of you who may not know, I am an advanced sommelier with a court of master sommeliers. I'm one of approximately 400 in the world with this designation. Well, that was a while ago, so it's probably more than that. I'm sure more have graduated since then. But I ran fine wine programs up in Manhattan and also down in Miami for a number of years, and was the youngest director of education and marketing for a wholesale wine distributor in the U.S. prior to med school. So. That will be a separate podcast. No, I'm just kidding. The one thing that I think that I'm really excited about medical imaging AI is the how much excitement is growing beyond the initials. I mean, there's still reticence out there, right? As far as, okay, what is AI going to do for us in the future? But I feel that looking at the journals, looking at other journals besides, just within radiology, throughout medicine alone, people asking questions, being curious. It's almost another space age. It's another sort of leap within humanity, an age of enlightenment, if you will, that where people really start to question what's out there now, look to future solutions, and begin to dream again. And we haven't had a chance to dream in quite a while. So without being too poetic, I think that is really something I'm excited about, the generalized sort of zeitgeist of where we stand in medicine now.
I think if one were to dream, this is probably the best time to dream. So absolutely, John. Thank you. And Iwan, last but not least.
Sure. So maybe I start with a fun fact. So how did I get into biomedical engineering? It's like a bit over 10 years ago, I finished my bachelor's in computer science, went traveling around the world because I didn't have anything better to do. And then I took some English course. I mean, in my host family in New Zealand, like there was an orthopedic surgeon taking a 1 week English course there. And he was super excited about, all the technology and computer science things that are getting into the operating room that really helping him patients. And then that was kind of what got me interested in, okay, maybe I can use my programming skills there. And then when I came back, I went into biomedical engineering. I think that's a nice one. What I'm excited about, so I think when I studying biomedical engineering, it was always kind of being the engineering like sciences, many people thought, it's hard to get, for example, a radiologist to do segmentations, to train an AI algorithm. Then what was like maybe 5-6 years ago, Jeffrey Hinton, very famous AI researcher, gave this talk where he said, stop training radiologists. They will be replaced by AI. And now here we are today, and I have to worry that radiologists start taking over, programming and building AI systems, and the engineering is not needed anymore. I mean, that's sometimes how it feels. So you can really see how the field evolved from, radiologists thinking they will be replaced by AI. Nowadays, many radiologists are actually AI practitioners and build the models themselves. So to me, that's really exciting.
I agree. I think the future of the AI and radiology and engineering team is the direction we're headed in. So excited to see how that pans out as well. That is unfortunately the time for today. I just want to say, on behalf of my co-host, Dr. Paulucci, our Trainee Editorial Board, and I think our listeners, thank you for your time and your service for the journal. For our listeners, keep an eye out for much more great work from the Trainee Editorial Board, and absolutely visit not just the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, but also the Radiology AI website, the Vastly Deep blog, and go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter as well at Radiology_AI. So thank you again, John, Merel, Iwan, for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Oli.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Check out the latest articles from our panelists and their labs at the Radiology Artificial Intelligence website. Thanks again to all of our panelists involved in the conversation and for sharing their expert insights. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence podcast. Shout out to Uriah Shemchisen for our podcast music and to the RSNA podcast staff.
Email us at podcasts@rsna.org anytime with questions, feedback, or suggestions.